Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Hilary Davidson. Hilary is a best-selling, award-winning novelist and journalist. She's the author of two mystery series, two standalone novels, two short story collections, a novella, and some 50 short stories, which have appeared in Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, Thuglit, Mystery Scene, Beat to a Pulp, and other publications. Her fiction has won two Anthony Awards and a Derringer Award, and has been translated into French, German, Hungarian, Polish, Romanian, and Russian. And her eighth novel, a standalone thriller, Every Lie I Told, is coming out in June. Welcome, Hilary.
Thank you so much for having me, Danielle. I'm so excited to be here.
So fun to have you. I should have said it's coming out this month because as you're listening, it is June, but we are
Right.
recording this in.
Right. So June 16th is no longer far away.
No, it's so soon. And I think my brain is still, I'm still a little bit befuddled after my tour. So this is for all you listening, it is currently June, and here we are announcing Hilary's next novel. Before we dig into all the exciting things, tell us about Every Lie I Told.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that amazing intro. So, Every Lie I Told is really a story about two sisters who could not be more different. The main character, Jackie Swift, is what I would call a professional liar. She's a PR person, but she does PR for criminals and very shady people who need their reputations rehabilitated. Her sister, Maddie, by contrast, is much more of a, she cares about justice, she cares about people, she cares about making the world a better place. But unfortunately, this passion for justice has actually led her down some dark paths. So when the book begins, Jackie gets a call from Maddie telling her that she's at a party and that she's overdosed on a drug and she needs Jackie to get over there with the antidote. And so Jackie goes running over in the middle of the night. And instead of finding her sister, she finds an empty mansion, empty except for a man's dead body. And Jackie knows the man. It's someone that she used to work for. It's someone who has abused lots of women. He's done some really terrible things, and Jackie has had a hand in covering them up. But her sister's nowhere to be found. And Jackie's assumption is that her sister called her because she knows that she does cleanup work. And Jackie figures, well, she must want me to cover up this murder. And so Jackie sort of takes it as her role to lie to the police and throw other suspects under the bus. And as the book goes on, you start to find that some of her assumptions about what happened and what her sister actually wanted were deeply flawed.
It's such a fun book, and it's fun to read about. I really appreciate these like morally, you know, ambiguous, even on the side of sort of blackish female characters, because I think that's sort of fun. There's a fun little sort of female revenge against these men and so on. But I want to talk about this because you mentioned before we started recording that you have, you've written so many short stories. I have written like two short stories in my whole life. Is it so weird? I feel like short stories are so hard. And I want to talk more about that. But
Really different. Yeah,
yeah, they're
different.
so
Yeah.
you just you have to be very much you have to be smarter and more concise and but anyway, but you were mentioning that many of those are really about sort of bad girls, but your novels have traditionally been about good girls. So this is sort of a departure for you, and sort of I'm curious to know why do you think they've been different that way, and what sort of led you to make this to sort of go the route of bad girl for this book?
That is such a great question because my short stories really sort of go deep into the dark side, and the range of characters that I've explored there are often people sometimes who've started with good motivations, but it's led them down really bad paths. Sort of like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I
Right.
would say a lot of these characters have good intentions, but
Right.
it goes awry. But I would say that while I love having these short stories as a playground, I've often found it's kind of hard to stay with characters like that for a longer project. That there's sort of there's something about like the earnestness of a detective who's, really wants to solve a case, who's passionate about this, who cares about something, that in a book has made it kind of easier to go with almost like a good girl kind of character. When I was writing the Shadows of New York series about an NYPD detective named Sheryn Sterling, that's really, it's a passion for justice that got her into that line of work in the first place. And so to deviate from that would be sort of to really destroy like the essence of her character. But I would say that my work has kind of explored more of the dark side as I've gone along. So my last standalone before this was called Her Last Breath. And in that book, my main character was certainly a good girl in terms of wanting to solve her sister's murder. She wanted justice, but she was actually a violent character who was traumatized by sort of generational violence in her family and who often like acted out in violent ways, even, in pursuit of good aims. So I feel like I've been slowly maybe
Yeah, making
working my way towards, because in Jackie, she is definitely the most amoral character, immoral and amoral.
yeah.
I say that because, she acts in, terrible ways, but she also often doesn't really have a sense of what
Yes,
moral, like
and she
true
doesn't really
morality
care.
would
It
be.
is interesting. It's
Yeah,
very much a sort of survival instinct, right? She's
exactly,
really, yeah,
exactly.
she's really just
And
like focused on how she's going to get through this and how she's going to get her sister through it.
yeah, she's gone through life. She has a very big chip on her shoulder because she and her sister lost their parents at a young age in separate circumstances. Their father was in the military and their mom was a teacher. But they've been on their own since really early on. And Jackie feels like all of these people that she meets in New York, they come from family wealth. They have all these advantages that she doesn't have. And it makes her, like you say, go into survival mode where she feels like, well, if she doesn't do sort of, if she doesn't take every opportunity and do some of these terrible things, she'll never have a chance. And
Right.
so
And you sort
definitely
of
comes out of
I
desperation.
sort of understand that, even from like the perspective of like, the Sheryn Sterling series, it's like you do see these detectives who start out with sort of the right intentions. They're there to serve justice, but then you see how the system works. And this is a little bit of Jackie too. You see how the system works, and it does oftentimes fail justice, right? And then you
Absolutely.
think,
Yeah.
well, if I'm really going to get justice, I'm probably not going to get it by the like most like honest procedure. And I think
Yeah.
that's sort of maybe
Yeah.
why we see things move more and more to the dark side.
It's true. I mean, I think we've seen this in real life now so many times. We all know so many examples of just the system, failing the person and, someone who committed a really minor crime being incarcerated for years, being killed. I
Yeah.
mean, really dire, horrific consequences for people that, didn't do anything terribly wrong.
Right.
And, it's like you say, like even the police working in this system, you've got people who get very jaded because they do see hardcore criminals getting away with things
Right.
and the system just breaking down, completely. So, yeah, I would say maybe that's sort of in a way like why I wanted to explore darker themes in this book. I think certainly, the whole Me Too era and the reckoning that we went through with that was something that made me think a lot about behavior that we used to accept for anyone who,
Right.
was living through the 90s and working then and things now are kind of glossed over and glamorized about that area, but sexual assault was just so rampant and people didn't even consider it sexual assault when it
Right.
happened.
Yeah, I mean, so
So,
you've been,
yeah.
I mean, like me, you've been at this a long time. Like, I
Right.
mean, right? Like, when did your first book come out, Hillary?
My first novel came out in 2010.
Okay.
I was publishing nonfiction travel books for a decade before that, but
Yeah.
so my first novel was 2010, though. That was The Damage Done. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting to even see. I mean, even in our little world, right, how things have sort of changed, and it
Oh,
is
yeah.
interesting to see sort of like how it changes the perspective. I mean, what do you? I mean, so yeah, you've been, this is I started in 2000. So when you were starting publishing your travel books, my first novel came out. But this is a long. I mean, for a lot of people I talk to are not have not been doing this for as long. So,
Yeah.
how do you tell a story now that feels different from how you told a story? Or, what has changed in your process, and what things do you feel like, oh no, this is never going to change. This is how I do it.
Oh, wow. I wish I could say that my process had substantially changed
Yeah,
because
I
that
get
would
that.
mean it improved. It has not. I'm a seat of the pants writer and always have been. And I remember years ago, someone telling me, like, well, basically, as you do more of this and get into it, you'll start writing outlines and it'll be really streamlined. It is not. Eight
That's
novels in, and I'm
That's so
still,
funny. I have
yes.
I have had that. Was that an older white man? I feel like I've had that exact same quote told said to me. Like when you figure out what you're doing, this is how you'll do it.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
oh, that sounds like an insult, sort of. And here I am, 17 books. No, I still do it the same way I always did it. But thank you
Yeah.
for that. Like
Yeah.
when you're not such a moron, you'll start to outline. I don't outline either, Hillary.
Exactly.
That is
I did feel like hurt at the time, and I felt also like, am I being a baby about this? Maybe this does change. And I've realized since, like, people, you get a lot of judgment. Like, there's a lot of judgment in publishing, just like anything else, where if you don't do things my way or what I think is the official adult way that people are supposed to do them, you're not doing them right.
right.
And it's kind of crazy to apply ideas like that to such an intuitive, creative field. I mean, we're writing novels, but storytelling has existed forever.
Right.
And, so really, like you're going to tell the storyteller the only one way to tell a
And
story.
it's existed forever without outlines too, let me tell you. And some of them, I mean, I've talked to now, like 200, I've had 200 or something of these interviews. And I gotta tell you, some of the really big names, some of the people who are doing really wonderful work in this field do not do outlines.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think, I think, and I'm gonna mess it up, but I feel like I just talked to Lisa Jewell last fall, and I don't think she does an outline, and she's
Oh,
obviously doing
wow.
just fine. So I feel like it is a judgment, but I do think there is a generation of authors who do sort of like do some crazy big outline. But I oftentimes feel like if that takes the sort of organic twists out of a process, right?
It does, absolutely. For me, my feeling about it is that if I can work all of this out in advance on paper, the reader is going to figure this out before they're even at the halfway point in the book,
Right.
because that's logic plotting. I'm really character driven when I write. It's really my characters they're alive. They're just like people that I know in real life. They're alive in my brain, and they often do things that I don't like, don't
Yes,
agree
you're
with.
like, what are
Like,
you doing? This is
yeah,
a
this is
terrible idea.
crazy. This terrible idea. Do not
Right.
do this. But they do that, and I follow them there. And I feel like I'm channeling something often when I write. I remember hearing Val McDermid speak years ago, and she was talking about, how she's the boss of her characters and she can make them do anything. And I feel like, wow, mine are like really unruly children. Like, I am
Yes.
not the boss of them. They do
No.
what they want. I'm following them. I'm fascinated by them. But I do think that the sort of benefit of that is that I actually don't see twists coming
Right.
in my book, and it makes it harder for, the reader isn't going to have these things necessarily telegraphed because, hey, the writer was surprised too.
I feel the same. I feel very similarly. But I'm curious to know sort of like because when you start a book, when you start a new project, you don't really even know your characters yet, right? So do you do something
Yeah.
ahead of time to get to know them, or do you just sort of feel like you get to know them over the course of the first draft, and then there's revisions that happen? How does that work for you?
Yeah, for me, it's very much diving into the first draft is how I get to know my characters. I have tried, there have been exercises people have recommended in the past for sort of a get to know you, and they honestly feel just as forced as if you were, meeting someone in a bar and
Right.
trying to trade life stories. Like, that's not happening. So, to me, the first draft is really to understand the character, to understand their history, their motivation, their passion, like what is driving them, what are they afraid of, and all of that comes out in the first draft. My first drafts, I never show anyone. They are beyond terrible, and they don't make logical sense because I will literally skip over scenes that I don't know how to connect. It'll be like one point they're here, now they're over here, but it's about the character and kind of who this character is. And so I kind of use the first draft to connect with that and then dig back in and start making it into a book in the second draft. And I just accept that about the
Yeah.
process now.
It's
You
a
know,
little
I
easier. I mean, I still get terrified at the end, at the beginning of each book and think, I don't know how to do this, right? I mean, there's this, like,
yes,
I think
it
maybe that's just where
I'm so glad you're saying that because
no,
I
always.
feel, so often I feel like that when I start a new book, there's the enthusiasm that carries me at the very beginning. Like I'll get, 8 chapters in, carried along by enthusiasm. And then the cold feet start. And I think, what have I gotten into? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to get out of this. And it has been like that, I'd say almost every book. The only exceptions have been in writing a series, like, when I was
Oh,
writing the
here.
Lily Moore series, for instance, writing the third book in that series was probably the easiest time I ever had writing a book because I knew the character and her world and I wasn't inventing everything. The
Right.
exciting thing with a standalone, like Every Lie I Told, is that I don't have the safety net, so anything can happen at any time.
Right. And you
But
don't have the
then it's
constraints,
tough.
right? Because a
Yeah.
series is also, it's a safety net, but it's also constrained. Like you can't give
Yeah.
her a new
Yeah.
backstory in the third book because you already have her back.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like you have this set of rules and kind of a relationship with the reader where, I mean, Lily's best friend Jessie was not going to get killed off. Like it didn't matter what
Yeah.
trouble they got into. Like they're just sort of like a kind of deal you make with the reader that this is the parameter for the world. And so kind of the exciting thing with a standalone is that, you're just jumping off, no net underneath you, anything can happen, but it is, it's to me much more work and much more revising. I go
Yeah.
through multiple drafts, putting together this book. It was about I think 4 drafts before I let my agent read it.
Yeah.
And then there was, the process. He was an editor for 20 years, so he always has
You work with
questions and
Dan.
ideas and that, which is great because I
Yeah.
actually love being edited. I love diving back in
Yeah.
and, thinking about these things and why did I put this in and,
Right.
you know,
Right.
structurally, like,
I
does this
I think I
work?
know who your agent is, and he's incredible editorially too. Right? Is
Yeah,
it Dan? Are
yeah,
you?
it's Mitch Hoffman. Yeah,
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
Mitch. Right. Yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And he's
Amazing.
worked with, so many greats. I mean, he's worked with Harlan Coben and like
Yeah,
just so many
yeah.
great
Harlan
writers.
actually called him out at the. Hillary and I just came from Thriller Fest, which is the big thriller writer conference. If you don't know what that is, check it out because it's every year. It's in New York. I think next year is actually in April because they're going to do it kind of close to the Edgars. They're going to kind
Oh,
of like put things
wow.
together, which is so fun because
I didn't know that. They keep moving it
I
around.
know
So the
they,
one thing
but
is
I
I
think
kept
for
keep
those of
checking
us
the
who
calendar.
travel, having it be next to the Edgars is lovely because then we could stay for both kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, Harlan, we got the silver Grandmaster Silver Bullet. He got some award, and he mentioned Mitch in his pitch, and Mitch was there. So anyway, that's cute. Yes. So anyway,
Yeah.
but an editorial agent is a huge asset if you're somebody who is grappling with sort of the you know this is whole because you don't outline it, I feel like.
Yeah, it's gold. I mean, for me, it's a big moment, like when I'm ready to show,
Yeah.
someone the book, and Mitch is usually the first reader on it. And we don't always agree. I mean, the really funny thing is that sometimes we will like disagree seriously about things, but I know if he brings up a point, it needs to be addressed in some way.
Right.
Like, generally speaking, if there's something he brings up, it absolutely needs to be addressed, but maybe his suggestion is not necessarily the
Right, not
way
the way
to
you want to
go.
fix it. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's almost like, but anything he calls out as, something that's not working or this didn't hit right. Yeah, he's right about that
Yeah,
100% of the time.
I think that is interesting. I think it's hard when editors or any editorial is prescriptive. That is, it says this is how you need to fix it versus saying this is a problem. Like, this
Yeah.
doesn't. So okay, but sorry, I got excited by Mitch and got off track. But let's go back for a second because 4 drafts is a lot. So you get this first draft, which is like you said, it's got even holes in it
Oh,
potentially.
yeah,
And
huge
then
holes.
do you just sort of go, are you working in Word? Do you go back and just, or do you sort of start a new document and pull things in? How do you do that?
So I work in Scrivener.
Yes.
That's my go-to program, and it makes it really easy to sort of you have a the document that you worked on, you can keep that, but then you can go in and just, create kind of your duplicate file that you
Yeah.
then work from. And so I will literally go in and start, tearing stuff up and moving things around. um, just sort of rethinking, the book, like realizing, I guess, until I get to the end of the first draft, I often don't even know what the themes are. There's all
Right.
of the stuff that's stuck at the back of my
Right.
brain
Right.
that, and I know writers who are much more cognizant when they write that they want to hit these notes, they have this
Oh
theme.
no. Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't know, man. The muse is calling. And this is
Yeah.
basically when I say channeling, like again, like I'm not really in control of this process.
Right.
That's fine. I know that once I get to the end of that first draft, that these things will start being visible to me. So the second draft, I mean, when I say I do a first draft, the first draft is often very short. It might only be 40,000
Oh wow.
words. It's
Okay.
certainly
Okay.
not like a full book length. And flesh starts to go on the bone in the second draft. So by then I understand the character's backstory, and you start to see how that takes shape and how that brought them to where they are.
Mhm.
So in Every Lie I Told, it meant that when I first, went through the first draft, it wasn't until I got to the very end when I understood Jackie and Maddie's backstory
Yeah,
and
their
kind of,
parents and stuff. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. They had
their
a complicated
parents.
family. Yeah.
And right, and also the guardian that they had
Mhm.
after their
Yep.
parents died, and kind of how they were shaped, and how, and I don't want to get spoilery here, but
No,
there
no
was
spoilers.
there was abuse,
Yeah.
and how that shaped their characters.
Right.
It is, incredibly relevant. But in the second draft, I start seeding that in
Yeah.
earlier in the book.
Yeah.
You start thinking about how it actually shapes the characters. So it's both, the plot starts to really form properly, and
Yeah.
also the characters start to seem like they're more natural. They're more like real people. The third draft is where, all my big ideas. Sometimes in the second draft, I'll change my mind about something and think, what if I, in the case of Every Lie I Told, it was the ballroom scene near the end. I wanted this really big scene where Jackie
Yeah.
is forced to reveal all her lies in front of
Yeah.
a huge audience. And when I first wrote it, it was much smaller scale. And in the third draft, it became the much
Right.
bigger,
That big
huge
gala event in
scene that
honor
it
of, yeah,
became.
exactly. Um,
Yeah. And so that's the sort of thing. And then the fourth draft is more just tidying things up. So I feel like it's, words are spelled correctly and
right,
things,
right,
no
right.
terrible
Because you're just
grammatical
going to go to
errors.
Mitch, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
has it happened for you that in the course of writing of, once you finish a first draft, in the second and third drafts, the sort of who did it, did those things change?
Those will change. In this book, what really developed, and this was kind of hard and painful to write. The core of the story for me was always about Jackie and her sister,
Yeah.
but the more that I wrote about Jackie and the murder victim, the more I realized I really needed to flesh that relationship out,
Right, right.
because Eric, the man who's murdered at the beginning of the book, he was a terrible person in so many ways, and there would be so many people who could tell you, terrible stories
Right.
about him. But at the same time, he and Jackie were close,
They
and he was a
were, right.
surrogate.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he was like a
He gave her
surrogate
a chance
father
in a way
figure.
that he sort of recognized her hunger and gave her a chance where she
Exactly.
didn't really feel like she was getting it from anyone else. So she had it, and actually I think that rings so true to me that we can have a real, we can be protective and let be loyal to people who don't deserve loyalty, except for in our situation they did something for us that makes us loyal to them. It's
Yeah,
really
there's this kind
it
of
yeah,
acknowledgement of, I mean, because they were both, poor kids from the wrong side of the
right.
tracks, and he took her under his wing, and there was no sexual element to it,
No,
even though
that
he
was
was
good,
exploiting,
right? That would have been,
yeah, these
if
other
there had been
women.
that, we would have been like, hee,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, it was actually like a really a warm, wonderful
A weird,
relationship that
wholesome,
was
yeah, a wholesome
weirdly good for,
relationship
yeah,
considering who they
both of
were.
them.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, initially I was shying away from that because Eric is terrible. He's a bad person. And I think, we so often have a tendency to write people off
Yeah.
if they're bad. And it's like, no, you know what? I've got to own it and acknowledge it and, represent this relationship in its fullness as well. How two really bad people can actually
Right.
sometimes, bond and, have a relationship that makes them both better in at least some small
And I
ways.
love this sort of like, I love the fact that like there's a lovable element in the worst people, right? The idea is that like, I mean, it's even Hannibal Lecter had a part of him that was sort of like, that felt for Clarice or whatever it was, like, protected her, whatever it was. It's like I think that's weirdly interesting. And also I think much more, fun to read about than somebody who's just bad. Right, because
Absolutely.
it's too reductive. Nobody's
Yeah.
nobody's just one thing.
Yeah, humans are so weirdly layered.
Yeah.
And, we live in an age where I think there's just a tendency to sort of demonize people really quickly, often because of politics, but
Yes.
for good reasons too, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to do. And then, once you've done that, once you've dehumanized them, it's so easy to think, well, there are only bad qualities,
Right.
they're so terrible. But I'm always fascinated. There were these groups that sometimes try to bring together people who are very, far apart on the political divide and bring them into a room to talk. And they end up finding, they have so much in common.
Yeah.
We all love our families. Like we
Right.
have these certain
And we
things
all
that are
love our
just
country. We
human.
just love it.
Yeah, yeah,
We have different perspectives. No, this is very true. And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's important. It's so hard
yeah.
to be open to the idea that we have more in common than we do not.
Exactly. And I'm always on guard about that. I remember years ago going to, it was like a Holocaust museum. And one of the things it was focusing on was how the Jews were demonized sort of before the Holocaust, and how as you dehumanize people, it's much easier to
You can
punish them
kill
and
them.
much easier to
Right.
believe.
Yes,
And
exactly.
it can be applied to any group. I mean, there are multiple groups around the world that this has happened with, but the procedure is always the same. And so I think of this with characters. If I start to think of a character as just they're such a villain,
Yeah.
they're really evil, they're terrible. It's like, well, no, like what are they like in their quiet private moments?
Right.
Like they're not being a villain 100% of the time. And so I try to find that there's a character in this book actually who's a
Yeah.
horrible character known as Death Magnet
I
because
know exactly. I know exactly who you're going to talk about. And
and he's
actually, I
terrible,
felt
terrible,
moments
terrible.
with him kind of like I mean, I would not have wanted to be necessarily at lunch with him, but I did. I mean, I thought moments of him. I was like, there's something to him too, right? He was
Yeah,
protective of Eric, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, and loyal to Eric, and worried about Eric at some point in that when we couldn't reach him. And I thought that was that made. I mean, again, it just gives people nuance, which I think is so much more interesting to read about.
Yeah, and if you know someone's bad, you always know, well, they're going to go down this bad path. When people are layered, even if it's a villain, there's, different steps they take that
Yeah.
you might not predict. And so I
Yeah.
think it just makes for like a more lifelike, more realistic
Yeah.
character. And, everybody has these unexpected facets to them. So it's more exciting to write about.
Yes, it's much more interesting to write about. Yeah. And that is really, I mean, it's important. I think you can feel our energy on the page, right? If we're interested in the story and we're excited about the characters and we see them in all their colors and all their shades of gray, then I think the reader does too. And that's, yeah, it's a mix for a much better story. So, well, I want to hear, I feel like we could talk all day, clearly. But I want to hear, can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on next?
Oh, sure. Yes, I'm actually burning the midnight oil. I'm sort of in prep mode for going on tour for Every Lie I Told. But I'm working on a book right now that's set in the 1980s. It's the first time that I've ever set a book in a different era. But the reason for it is sort of the 1980s was like an amazing age for discovering that work that had been presented as being by a certain man was actually done by his wife. There
Yeah.
were, yeah, there were painters, there were novelists, there were scientific researchers, and this was sort of cracking open and bubbling to the surface. There was one really notorious trial in particular where a judge ordered both the husband and wife to paint in court because they were both claiming ownership of these pictures. And the husband was like, "Oh no, my shoulder, I can't paint." And the wife went on to, create a masterpiece in court that was just like the other stuff she had painted under her husband's name. And I'm writing a book about a woman who's been sort of in service to her husband like that for many years as he's cheated on her and abused her in different ways. And the truth is just starting to bubble to the surface.
I
So
love
I'm
that.
exploring
I love
that.
it. Well, I remember some of those. I know I can think of at least one novelist that you might be referring to, but that is that sounds really interesting, Hillary. I love that. And I imagine there's probably going to be murder involved.
Oh yes, I forgot to mention
There
that.
has to be
Yes,
murder. Well,
one of
that's
one of the
super
girls.
exciting.
Yeah, at the beginning of the book, one of the girls that the husband has been dallying with turns up dead, and he wants to blame this on his wife, who's kind of his golden goose, who's taking care of everything. And it's the one thing she doesn't. She's been fine with not taking credit for other things. She definitely doesn't want credit for a murder she
Yeah,
did.
she's like, no, thank you on that one.
Yeah.
That's so fun. Okay, well, we are going to be giving away a copy of Every Lie I Told, either over on Facebook at Danielle's Killer Women or on Killer Women Podcast on Instagram. So look for that. And Hillary, tell our listeners where to find you so they can read about the tour and where you're going to be and all and what's coming up next.
Yeah, yeah. I guess best thing would be come find me at my website, which is just my name, Hilary Davidson. I'm a 1L Hilary, so it's HILARYDAVIDSON.com. Events are listed there. I have a newsletter that I'm very lazy about, sending out newsletters. So if you sign up for it, I promise I will not be spamming you, but you will get occasional updates, sometimes exclusive short stories or, different things that come up there. So come to the website and just go from there.
And that'll probably link us also to your if you on your socials and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, the socials are all there as well. Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of
The
like the
dreaded
one-stop
socials.
shopping for stuff. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, this was really fun. Everyone, go check out Every Lie I Told and follow Hillary. Get on her occasional newsletter for the next thing because I can't wait to read about to read the next book.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful talking to you, Danielle.
So fun. Everyone, thank you for joining us today on Killer Women with Hilary Davidson, and we will see you next time. Bye.